github.com/super simple dev/javascript-amazon-project and press enter. You can also find the starting code in the description by clicking here and then going to the links for this lesson. And on this page, we can see the starting code for the Amazon project. So this code contains all the HTML and CSS that we need. The reason we're going to use some starting code instead of writing all of this ourselves is because this course is focused on JavaScript, not HTML and CSS. If we were to write all of this code ourselves, it would just take up too much time, and it would be an entire course by itself. If you want to learn how to create this code, you can check out my HTML and CSS full course, which will teach you all the skills that you need. But for this JavaScript course, we're going to start with the HTML and CSS here, and we're just going to focus on adding JavaScript to this website. So now, let's download all of this code. We can do that by clicking this green code button here, and then click Download Zip. Once that's finished downloading, we're going to go to our Downloads folder. So for me, it's this folder right here called Downloads. And then we're going to unzip this file by double-clicking it. And this will give us a folder that contains all the code. So we're going to select this folder and move it to our desktop. Next, let's go to our desktop. So we're going to close this for now, and I'll hide the browser. And on the desktop, we're going to select the folder that we downloaded, and we're going to rename this. So at the end, we'll remove main and press enter to rename it to JavaScript Amazon project. Next, we're going to take this folder and open it in our code editor. So let's open VS Code, and we're going to click File, Open Folder, and we're going to find the folder that we downloaded. For me, it's on the desktop, and it's this folder right here. So we'll click this folder, and then click Select Folder. And then we can close this welcome message. Okay, so now we have our starting code, and we're going to set up the project. So first, let's open our browser again, and we can close the GitHub page, as well as the tabs for the previous lessons. So we'll close these tabs right here, but we'll leave the final Amazon project open. Next, let's go back to VS Code, and we're going to open this project in our browser. So we're going to select this file, amazon.html. So this file corresponds to the home page here. So let's select this file, and then right-click, Open with Live Server. So I'm just going to rearrange my windows here so we can see these side by side. And now we're ready to begin. So let's take a look at the code that we have to start with. As I mentioned, all we have here is the HTML and CSS for this website. There's currently no JavaScript at all on this page. So one thing you'll notice is that we can actually create almost all of the website using just HTML and CSS. We actually don't even need JavaScript to create all of this. We're able to create the header at the top, as well as 3 products to start with. And this shows that HTML and CSS can pretty much create everything that we see visually on the website. Where JavaScript comes in is that JavaScript makes this website interactive. So right now, if we click the Add to Cart button, it looks pretty nice, but it doesn't actually do anything. And that's because we haven't added JavaScript yet. So the role of JavaScript is to make our website interactive after we created all the content and the styling. Now, before we begin adding JavaScript to this website, we're actually going to take some time and learn another very useful technology called Git. So Git is a technology that lets us track changes in our code. For example, do not follow along here, but let's say that I'm working on this website and I go into my code editor and I change some code here. So let's say that I add some code here, and then in this file, I'm going to delete some code. So just select some code and delete it, and then save. And then in this file, I'm going to change some code at the bottom. So now, let's say that I made a mistake, and I want to undo all the changes that I just made. So how would I do that? How would I remember all the code that I changed in the different files? So right now, this is really difficult, and this is a problem that we run into in bigger projects. We're changing lots of code in different files, and it's really hard to keep track of what code has changed. And this is where Git comes in. Git lets us track changes in our code, and it helps us solve this problem. So here's what it looks like if I have Git set up in my project. I can go into this section of VS Code. This section is for Git, and then here, Git will tell me which files I changed. And if I click these files, it will tell me which lines I changed and exactly which code I changed. If I want to, I can click this button to reverse all the changes in this file. I can also click here to reverse all the changes in all the files. So as you can see, Git helps us track changes in our code, and it lets us easily undo our changes if we need to. And this technology is really useful in bigger projects, like this Amazon project, where we're going to be changing lots of code in many different files. So before we start this project, we're going to learn how to set up and use Git. The first thing we need to do is to install Git. To do that, we can go to this section of VS Code called Source Control. Now, if this section looks like this, with a button Initialize Repository, that means you already have Git installed. Otherwise, if you're on Windows, you can click this button and then click Open, or you can go to this website directly and then click this link to download Git. Once it's finished downloading, we're going to run the installer and then just go with the default options. If you're using a Mac, you can click up here and then type terminal and press enter. And inside here, you're going to type git and press enter, and then click this link and install Git. All right, after installing Git, we're going to restart VS Code. And make sure you have the Amazon project open. And now if we go into the Git section, it should look like this, with the button Initialize Repository. So now that we've installed Git, we're going to set up Git in our Amazon project. We can do that by clicking Initialize Repository. If this button doesn't work for you, you can also try going to the Terminal menu and click New Terminal. And then inside this terminal, type git init and press enter. So a repository is just a folder where changes are being tracked. By clicking Initialize Repository, this turns the current folder, which is JavaScript Amazon project, into a repository. And now all the changes inside this folder will be tracked by Git. So to start off, Git will tell us that all of these files are new files. And that's because we just set up this repository. So all of these files are considered new changes. that we're starting to keep track of. Next, we need to configure a username and email with Git. Now don't worry, this information is not used anywhere online. This is just for Git to add an author to the changes that we make. So to configure a username and email, we're going to go to the top and open the terminal menu and click New Terminal. And then inside here, we're going to type git config user.name and double quotes. Now, if this looks familiar to you and you've already done this before, you can skip this step and the next step. So between these double quotes, we'll pick a username that we want to use. So for me, I'll use super simple dev and press enter. And we'll also configure an email by typing git config user.email, double quotes, and between these double quotes, we'll put an email. So I'll put simon@supersimple.dev and press enter. So now that we configured a username and email, we can close this terminal. Next, we're going to save these changes into Git so that Git will start tracking any new changes that we make. To save these changes, we're just going to type a message here describing what we changed. So let's just type the message, add the starting files. And then we're going to click commit. And if this pop-up shows up, we're going to click yes. So that will take all of our changes and save them into Git. So now that we've saved those changes into Git, any new changes that we add will start showing up here. So let's do an example, and let's change some code in a couple of different files for practice. So let's click this icon up here to show our code, and let's go into amazon.html, and we'll just change this title to Intro to Git and save. And then let's go into checkout.html. And at the top, let's actually remove the title and save. And then let's open orders.html. And at the top, let's just add something to the title, like page. If we save and then go into the source control section or the Git section, it will tell us all the changes that we just made in our code in the 3 different files. If we click one of these files, it will actually tell us exactly which code that we changed. Now, if your Git section looks like this, where the changes are on top of each other instead of side by side, if you want to, you can change this by clicking these 3 dots here, making sure that inline view is unchecked, and also unchecking use inline view when space is limited. So now it's very easy to undo this code. We can just take the code on the left and then copy paste it on the right to undo this change. We can also click here to undo all the changes in this file. And up here, we can also click this button to undo all the changes in all the different files. So that's an intro to Git. It helps us keep track of changes in our code, and it's very useful for bigger projects like this Amazon project, where we're going to be changing lots of code in many different files. If you want to learn about Git in more detail, you can check out my Git and GitHub full course in the video description. So now that we've set up Git, let's start the Amazon project. So first, make sure that this section is empty and we've reversed all the changes that we made when practicing Git. Next, let's click this icon to show our files, and let's remove the previous code. And we're going to start in the amazon.html file. and let's close the Git page, and then open the tab for this file. It should say amazon.html up here. So we'll start by creating the list of products on the home page. So right now, we start with 3 products. If we go to the final project, we're going to add the rest of the products that you see here. And we're also going to make this interactive so that when we click the Add to Cart button, it will add this product to our cart. So let's go back to our project. And in order to create this, we're going to learn the main idea of JavaScript. So when using JavaScript, we usually do a 3-step process. The first step is to save the data. And then we generate the HTML. And finally, we make it interactive. Let's go through each step to create this list of products. So right now, we have 3 products on our page to start with, and we're going to add more products to this page. So let's start by finding the HTML for one of these products, because we can always just copy and paste this to create another one. Now we're going to learn a very important skill for bigger projects, which is how to find the code for something on this page. So let's say that we want to find the code for one of these products. We're going to right-click and click Inspect, and this will bring up the console. And I'm actually going to click these 3 dots and click this icon to move the console to a separate window so that we can see the whole web page. So now we're going to click this icon in the top left, and we're going to hover over and click the thing that we want to get the code for. So I want to get the code for this entire first product, so I'll click in this space, and this will tell us that the code for the product is this code, a div with the class product-container. So now we're going to take this class and then search for it in our code editor. So let's open VS Code, and we're going to type Control F on Windows or Command F on Mac to search for code in this file. So we're going to search for the class that we saw earlier, which is product-container. And this will take us to the code for one of these products. So we can actually click the arrow on the left to collapse this code, and we'll see another product container, which corresponds to the second product. We can click this arrow again, and we'll see a third product container, which corresponds to the third product. So that's how we find the code for something on the page. Now, to add another product to this page, one thing we can do is to take this HTML and just make a copy of it at the bottom of the page. However, this is not a good idea, because if we add lots of products, we're going to be copying this HTML over and over. And if we expand this, you can see that each product has a lot of HTML code. So we don't want to be copying all of this over and over again. It's going to be a lot of code, and it's going to be hard to manage. Instead, another strategy is to generate this HTML code using JavaScript. So let's learn how to do that. Before we can do that, we need to add JavaScript to this page. So we're going to create a JavaScript file. So let's click up here to show our files. And first, let's create a new folder to contain all of our JavaScript code. So let's name this folder Scripts and press Enter. Next, let's click on our folder, and we're going to click this icon to create a new file. And we'll name this file Amazon.js and press Enter. So this will be the JavaScript file for this HTML file. Next, inside this JavaScript file, let's type the code console.log hello, just to make sure that this works, and save. Next, we're going to load this JavaScript file in our HTML file. So let's go back to amazon.html. And then at the bottom of the code, we're going to scroll down. And then right above the closing tag for the body, we're going to add a script element. And we're going to give this element an attribute src or source equals double quotes. And we're going to load this JavaScript file. So this JavaScript file is in a folder called scripts. So here, we're going to type the folder name scripts and then a / to go into the folder, and we'll load the file amazon.js and save. So now let's go back to the page and we'll open the console, right-click, inspect, and then click the console, and it should display hello. So now we're loading JavaScript on this page. So let's open up VS Code again, and we're going to generate all of this HTML using JavaScript instead. So the first step in our process is to save the data. What does this mean? Data means information. So in this case, the data is the information about our products. For example, the product's name, the price, ratings, and the image. So right now, the information about the products, or the data, is inside our HTML. So in our code, if we click here to expand this element, you can see that the information about the products, for example, the name and the image, is inside the HTML. So what we need to do is to take this data and save it inside our JavaScript so that our JavaScript can use it. So let's go to our JavaScript file, and I'm just going to put it down here so we can see it side by side. And we're going to move this data into our JavaScript. So let's remove console.log, and let's create a variable to save the data. So we'll type const, and let's name it products, and make it equal. And now we want to create something that closely matches our data. So in this case, we have a list of products. So in here, we're going to create an array, because an array represents a list. And now each product in the list has many values, like an image, a name, and a price. So we're going to use an object to represent each product, because an object lets us group multiple values together. So inside this array, we're going to create an object using curly brackets. And now inside this object, we're going to save the data for the first product. So first, let's find the data in our HTML. We're going to search for the product's name by typing Control F or Command F, and we'll search for black and gray. And this will take us to the code for the first product. So this is the name of the first product. So let's actually scroll up, and we're going to get the image for the first product. And we're going to take this and save it in our JavaScript. So let's select this code. We're going to right-click, copy, and then inside this object, let's create a property called image, colon, and then here, right-click and paste. And let's save this as a string. So at the front, we'll type a single quote, and at the end, we'll type a single quote. So we just saved the image inside our JavaScript. Let's move on and save the name inside our JavaScript. So we'll scroll down, we'll select this code, and then right-click, copy, and in this object, we'll type comma and a property called name, colon, a string, and we'll right-click and paste. Next, we're going to save the rating into our JavaScript. So we'll type comma, And let's create a property called rating, colon. For the rating, there's actually two parts, the stars and the number of ratings that it has. So let's actually group these two values into an object because these values are related to each other. So in here, we'll make the rating an object. And each rating will have the stars. And for the socks, it's 4.5, comma. And the rating will also have a count. And for the first product, it's 87. Next, let's save the price into our JavaScript. So we'll create another property called price. And for the first product, the price is $10.90. However, JavaScript has problems doing math with decimal numbers or floats like this. So a best practice when calculating money is to calculate in cents instead of dollars. So for this reason, we're going to save the price as cents. So we'll save it as 1,090 cents. As a reminder, $1 is equal to 100 cents. And because we're saving in cents, it's helpful to rename this property to price cents instead. So now if we scroll up, we just saved all the information or the data about the first product into our JavaScript. Next, let's go to the end here and type comma and create another object. And we're going to save the data for the second product into this object. So feel free to pause the video if you want to try it yourself first. So again, let's find this product in our HTML. We'll go to our HTML and type Control F or Command F to search for code. And we'll search for the name intermediate size basketball. So now this is the code for the second product. We're going to scroll up a bit and find the image for this product, and we're going to select it, right-click, copy, and then inside the second object, we'll create an image property, just like we did up here. And we'll save it as a string, and we're going to right-click and paste. And let's type comma, and we'll save the name inside the second object. So we'll scroll down and select the name, and then right-click, copy, and then down here, create a string, and right-click and paste. And we'll type a comma, and we'll save the rating, colon, object, and we'll save the number of stars, which is 4, and the number of ratings that it has, count, colon, 127. And finally, we'll type a comma, and we'll save the price of the product in cents, colon, 2,095 cents. So now the data for the second product is saved inside our JavaScript. Let's go to the end and type comma and create another object. And we're going to save the data for the third product inside. Again, feel free to pause the video to try it yourself first. So let's save the image. We'll find the code for this product in our HTML. So up here, we'll type Control F or Command F, and we'll search for the product name, which is Adults Plain Cotton T-shirt, and scroll up, and we're going to save the image first. So let's select this, right-click, copy, and then down here, create an image property, colon, and a string, and then right-click and paste. And we'll create a comma, and let's save the name in our JavaScript next. Create a string, and then we'll scroll down here. We'll select the name, right-click, copy, and then in here, right-click and paste, and comma, and we'll save the rating, colon, and object, and we have the number of stars. For this one, it's 4.5, colon, and the count. And for this one, it is 56. And lastly, type a comma, and we'll save the price in cents, colon, $7.99. And now let's save our JavaScript file. Now, one really important thing is to make sure that in each of these objects, we have the same properties. So we have the image property, the name property, and the same rating property with the same structure. We want all of our objects to have the same structure so that our code can handle each product the same. So that's what it means to save the data. We create something in JavaScript that closely matches the data that we have on the page. By the way, this is called a data structure because it structures or organizes the data, and this represents a list of products. So we usually use a combination of objects and arrays to create a data structure in JavaScript. So now that we've saved the data, the next step is to use this data to generate the HTML instead of writing the HTML manually. To generate the HTML, we can loop through this array. And for each of these products, we're going to create some HTML. So let's go ahead and loop through this array first. We'll scroll down to the bottom, and we'll type the name of the array, which is products, and then we'll loop through this array using a for each method. So we'll type dot for capital each brackets, and inside we'll create a function using brackets, arrow, and curly brackets, and we'll give it a parameter called product. So I'm going to move this back to the top here so we can see more of the code. So the way that for each works is that it takes each object, saves it in this parameter called product, and then runs the function. So it takes the first object, saves it in product, runs a function, takes a second object, saves the product, runs a function, and so on. So for each of these products or each of these objects, we want to create some HTML. So inside this function, let's create a variable, const HTML equals, and we'll create a template string using backticks. And now inside this template string, we're basically going to copy all the HTML for one of these products. So let's go back to our HTML file. And how do we find the HTML for one product? So we learned this earlier. We can right-click, inspect, and then click the top left icon, and click the element we want to get the HTML for. So this HTML represents one product, and we can search for this class product-container in our code. So we'll go back to our VS Code. Inside the HTML file, we can Control F or Command F to search for code, and we'll search for the class product-container. And let's go to the first result. So we'll go to the first result, which is here, and let's copy all of the code inside this element. One trick we can do is to click the arrow on the left to collapse it, and then we'll select all this code, and we'll right-click, copy, and then inside our JavaScript file, inside the string, we're just going to right-click and paste the HTML. And if we need to fix the formatting, we can select all of this code and then press Tab a few times to add some indents. And here we can remove the indent. And let's save. So now we're basically looping through the array of products, And for each product, we're creating all of the HTML that we had before. So we're generating this HTML using JavaScript. Now let's console.log this HTML to make sure that it's working. We'll scroll down to the bottom. And here, let's console.log the HTML that we just created. If we save and then go back to our page, right-click and inspect, and click the console, you can see in the console that we just generated all this HTML, and we generated 3 of these. Let's go back to our code and scroll up. Now, one problem here is that in the HTML that we generate, we don't want to have the name black and gray socks every time. For the second product, we want to have a different name and a different image. And for the third product, we want to have a different name and a different image. So how do we create slightly different HTML for each product? To do that, we're going to replace this part of the code with whatever the image property is. So for here, we're going to delete it, and we're going to insert the property image into this string. So to insert values into a template string like this, we can use $, open curly bracket, close curly bracket. And then inside here, we're going to insert the product.image property. So it's going to take whatever the image property is of the product and put it inside this HTML code. Same thing for the name. Instead of black and gray socks every time, we're going to delete this and then insert a value. We're going to insert the product dot, and we'll insert the name property this time into this HTML. So dot name. And we'll do the same thing for the other pieces of data. So for each product, the number of stars could be different. So instead of 4.5 every time, let's delete this, and we're going to insert the product's rating and stars. So product dot rating dot stars. One thing we have to watch out here for is that this image has to exist. So right now, if we substitute the product.ratings.stars into this, we will get this image. And if we go into our files by clicking here and open the images folder and then open the ratings folder, we can see that there's no image called rating-4.5. Instead, there's an image called rating-45. So if the rating is 4.5, we should convert it into 45 so that this image actually exists. Similarly, if the rating is 4, we should convert it into 40 so that this image actually exists. So in here, we should actually multiply this by 10 so that this points to an actual image that exists here. Next, let's move on. And we'll work on replacing the count. So we'll remove this and $ curly brackets, and we'll replace it with the products dot rating dot and the count property. So count. And finally, we're going to replace the price for each product. So in here, we're going to remove this and substitute product dot price cents. And remember that this is a number in cents, but when we display it on the page, we want to display it as dollars. So we're going to divide this by 100 because there are 100 cents in each dollar. So now in the HTML that we're generating, we're actually inserting the details about each product. If we save and then go back to the console right-click Inspect and Console, and look at the HTML that we generated, you'll see that it's different for each of the products. So that's how we use JavaScript to generate all the HTML here. So now the last step is we're going to combine all this HTML together into one string and put it on the web page. Let's go back into VS Code, and to combine all this HTML together, let's create a variable at the top for combining all the strings together. So we'll type let's call it products, capital HTML, and make it equal to an empty string to start. And then each time we go through the loop, we're going to add this HTML string up here. So instead of creating a new variable, we're just going to add products HTML equals itself products HTML plus this string. And remember, a shortcut for this is to just type plus equals. So this is called the accumulator pattern. We loop through an array, and each time we're adding to the result. So we're accumulating the result. And now that we combined all the HTML into this variable, we can scroll to the bottom, and let's remove this line because this doesn't exist anymore. And then after the loop, let's console.log the products HTML and save. And now if we go into our console, we combined all the HTML for all the products together. And now the last step is to take this HTML and put it on the page. And we can do that using the DOM. So let's go back into our code. And to use the DOM, we're first going to get an HTML element from the page and put it inside our JavaScript. So first, let's go to our HTML file. And remember that a product-container represents one of these products here. So we're going to look for this element here, a div products-grid. So this element contains all of our products. So we're going to use the DOM to take this element, put it into our JavaScript, and replace all the HTML inside. So to put this element in our JavaScript, we're going to give it a class. So let's add a class js-products-grid and save. And let's go into our JavaScript. So I'm just going to move this down to the bottom again so we can see it side by side. And then inside our JavaScript, at the bottom, we're going to use the DOM by typing document.querySelector, brackets, and a string. And we're going to type dot to select a class, and we're going to select js-products-grid. So the dot means we're going to look for a class called JS-products-grid, which is right here, and it's going to take this element and put it inside our JavaScript. And now we can change the HTML inside the element. To do that, we'll use the property .inner capital HTML, and we'll change it to the products HTML that we created above. So products capital HTML and save. So it's not going to look any different, but now we're actually generating all the HTML with JavaScript and then using the DOM to put this HTML inside here. So now we can actually delete all of this because we're generating this with JavaScript. If we save this file, our products will still be here because even though we deleted the HTML, we're now generating it with JavaScript. Now, one problem that I see here is that the price shows up with 1 decimal, but we actually want it to show up as 10.90. So let's scroll up to this part in the code. So we'll scroll up here and look for price cents. And the reason this happens is because price cents is 1090. So if we divide that by 100, the result is actually 10.9. If we want to force this to show two decimals, like 10.90, we actually have a special method that we can use with a number. So here, we can add brackets around this to make sure we calculate this number first. And numbers have a special method called dot to capital fixed and brackets. So to fixed will convert a number into a string, but we can tell it how many decimals we want between the brackets. If we type 2, it will show 2 decimals. So if we save, now it shows correctly on the page. If you're wondering how to find this method, you can find it by searching in Google or using an AI tool. Okay, let's take a break here and take a look at Git to see all the changes that we made. So I'm gonna expand this here, and we're gonna click the Git section. And it's gonna tell us that we changed 2 files. If we click the HTML file, Git will tell us that we deleted all of the HTML code for the products, which is correct. If we open the JavaScript file, Git will tell us that we added all of this new JavaScript code, including the data and the loop for generating the HTML. So Git helps us track all of the changes that we made. So now let's actually take these changes and save them into Git so we can track new changes. At the top, let's type a message to describe the changes that we made. So let's type generate HTML with JavaScript and click commit and yes if this shows up. So now let's talk about the benefit of generating the HTML. So let's close Git for now, and I'll move this to the side here. So the benefit of generating the HTML is that if we want to add another product, we don't have to copy paste all of this HTML again. All we need to do is to go up to the data and add the data for a new product. So let's do an example and add a 4th product to our list. So at the end here, let's type a comma and create another object. And let's go to the final project. And we'll scroll down to this 4th product here. So we're going to take the data about this product and save it in our JavaScript. So first, let's create a property image :string, and we're going to take this image and put it in here. To do that, we can right-click the image, inspect, and then we're going to copy this source attribute. So we can double-click it, and we can select this attribute, right-click, copy, and then inside our JavaScript, we're going to right-click and paste. And at the end, we'll type a comma and create the name property and a string, and we're going to select this name, right-click, copy, and then in here, right-click, paste, comma, and a rating property, :, and object. We have the stars, which is 5, and the count, which is 2,197. And at the end, we're going to add the price in cents, $1,899. So now if we save this JavaScript file and then go back to our project and we scroll down, you'll notice that it automatically added the 4th product. And all we had to do was to add another object to our array. and then our loop will handle generating all the HTML for us. So you can see that generating the HTML with JavaScript is a lot easier than copy pasting this HTML every time. And that's why we use this technique. Next, we're going to add the rest of the products in the final project. Now, one thing we could do is to manually copy this over one by one, but to make this easier, inside the starting code, I've actually created a file that contains all the data. So if we scroll up and close this for now, and we're going to go to this data folder and open it. And inside this folder, I've provided a JavaScript file called products.js. And in here, it contains an array with the data for all the products in the final project. So we don't have to create it ourselves. So now let's use this products array in our code. So first, we need to load this file on our page. We can go to our amazon.html file and then scroll down to the bottom. And then at the bottom, in the script element, we're going to add another script element above it. So we'll type script, and then the source is going to be equal to this JavaScript file. So we'll type the folder called data, and then a slash to go into the folder and load the file products.js. So what this does is that it will run the files one by one. First, it will run the products.js file and create the array, and then it will run our amazon.js file and generate the HTML. So back here, let's save, and then go back into amazon.js. So now, instead of using our own products array, let's just use the products array in this file. So we'll go back to amazon.js, and we're just going to delete this array. So over here, we can click this arrow to collapse the code, and we're going to select it, and then just delete it. And save. So now this variable will be coming from this file. If we go back to our project and scroll down, you can see that we created all the products in our final project. So the way this works is that inside our amazon.html, we're loading two JavaScript files. This JavaScript file creates all the products, and then this JavaScript file loops through the products and creates all the HTML. So keep in mind that script elements are loaded one by one, so the order matters. We have to first create the products array, and then we can use it. If these two were reversed, then the code wouldn't work. So this is how a real-world website is created. We don't write all the HTML manually. Instead, we save the data for the website in a data structure like this, and then we use JavaScript to generate the HTML using the data. So now let's go into Git and look at our most recent changes. So here it will tell us that we changed two files. In the amazon.html file, we added a script element, and then in the amazon.js file, we deleted the products array that we created on our own. So let's type a message to describe our changes. Use products.js file, and then click commit, and yes. Now, one other thing I want to show you about Git is if we go back to our files here and then open amazon.js, Git has a really useful feature called a history. So we can open this timeline section and then click this filter icon and only check Git history. And now you can see that we actually have a history of all of our changes for this file. So if we click the first line of the history, it will show us that here we added all of the code, and then the second line in the history, we deleted this part of the code. So this gives us a step-by-step history of all the changes in our code. And in Git, this is called a version history. You can also see that the messages that we created when we commit show up here. And these messages help us understand what was changed in each version in the history. All right, so let's close this for now. And the last step in the process is to make it interactive. So let's take a look at our current project. So we'll go here and open this tab, and let's scroll up. So right now, if we click the Add to Cart button, it doesn't do anything. So we're going to add some JavaScript to make this interactive and actually add this product to a cart. So first, let's find the Add to Cart button in our code. We'll go back to our amazon.js file, close this for now, and to find the code, we can actually just search the text in the button. So inside here, let's type Control F or Command F, and we're going to search for the text Add to Cart. And this will take us to the code for this button. So now we're going to add an event listener to this button and make it do something when we click it. To add an event listener, we're first going to add a class js-add-to-cart, and then we're going to use the DOM to add an event listener to this button. So down here, after we've put this HTML on the page, we're going to use document.querySelectorAll, brackets, and then a string, a dot, and we're going to select all the js-add-to-cart. So js-add-to-cart. So this will give us a list of all the add to cart buttons on the page. And then we can loop through each of the buttons. So we can type dot for each, brackets, and then in here we'll give it a function, bracket, arrow, and curly brackets, and a parameter. So the parameter is going to be the button element that we got from the page. So now for each of these buttons, we're going to add an event listener so we can do something when we click the button. To do that, we'll type button.add-event-listener, brackets, and then the event that we want to listen for, which is the click event, and then a function that we want to run when we click this button. So brackets, arrow, and curly brackets. So for now, let's just console.log a message to make sure that this is working. So we'll console.log added product and save. And we can also remove this line for now because we're not using it. And save again. And then now on our page, we're going to click Add to Cart and then look inside our console. So right click, Inspect, and click the console, and it displays Added Product. So now whenever we click one of these buttons, it will display this message. So that means that our code here is working correctly. Next, we need to figure out how to add the product to a cart, and we need to figure out what this looks like. If we think about a cart is basically just a list, and inside this list, we have the product that we want to buy and the quantity or the number of this product that we want to buy. So we can actually represent this in JavaScript as an array. Inside the array, we can have some objects, and each object is going to contain the product and a quantity. So we can use something like this to represent our cart. So let's go ahead and create this cart array. Now to keep things cleaner, let's actually separate the cart into its own file. So we'll click up here to show our files. And then we'll go into the data folder and click this folder and click this icon to create a new file. And we'll name this file cart.js and press enter. So this file will contain all the code relating to the cart. And the reason we separate it is to keep our code organized. Each file will focus on one particular thing. So inside cart.js, let's create our cart. So we can just create a variable const cart and make it equal to an array. So we'll start off with an empty cart. And let's save this file. And now we need to load this file into our HTML. So we can open amazon.html. And again, we can just add another script element. So let's add it at the top to make sure we load the cart before running the rest of our code. So we'll type less than script and the attribute source, and we'll load the data folder / to go inside cart.js and save. So now it will run this file at the start and it will create an array representing our cart. So now that we have a cart, we need to figure out what happens when we click a button. How do we add a product to this cart? So let's go back into amazon.js and we'll figure this out together. So down here, this is the function that is run when we click the button. So in here, we have to figure out how to add this product to the cart. One way to do this is to just add an object to the cart, like this. We have the product's name and the quantity that we want. However, when we click this button, how do we know which product we're supposed to add to the cart? To solve this problem, we're going to learn a feature of HTML called a data attribute. A data attribute is just another HTML attribute, except the purpose of a data attribute is that it allows us to attach any information to an HTML element. So let's do an example and create a data attribute. We're going to scroll up to the Add to Cart button here, and then at the end of the opening tag, after the class, we'll type enter, and then we're going to type data dash. And then we can type any name that we want, like product dash name. And we'll make it equal to double quotes. And then inside the double quotes, we're going to put the product's name, like a basketball or a t-shirt. So to do that, we're going to insert using $ and curly brackets, product dot name, and save. So now let's inspect the HTML on the page. We're going to right-click on this Add to Cart button and inspect. And then in the Elements tab, it will show us the HTML for the button. And now you can see that each of these buttons now has a data attribute called data-product-name, and it's equal to the product name. So before we continue, let's learn the syntax rules for the data attribute. A data attribute is just an HTML attribute. That means it follows the same syntax rules. We have an attribute name on the left and an attribute value on the right. The one difference is that data attributes have to start with data dash. And then we can give it any name that we want, like product dash name. But we have to make sure to separate the words with a dash. This is also known as kebab case. So the purpose of a data attribute is that we can attach any information to an element. So here we attached the product name to this button, but we can also attach the product's image or the price and so on. So now that we attached the product's name to this button, when we click this button, we can actually get the name, and this will tell us which product we should add to the cart. So let's see what this looks like in our code. So we'll go to our code, and then when we click the button, we're first going to get the product name from the button. To do that, we're going to type button and then the property dot data set. So the data set property basically gives us all the data attributes that are attached to this button. So now we're able to get the product name. So let's console.log this to see what it looks like. Console.log, open bracket, close bracket, and save. And then in here, let's click the basketball's add to cart button, and we'll go into our console, right click, inspect, and console. And I'm just going to move this to the left so we can see it side by side with our code. So this is what the dataset property looks like. It gives us all the data attributes that are attached to the element. So in our case, we have the product name. Now this works just like an object. So to access the product name, we just have to type dot product capital N name. So notice that the name gets converted from kebab case to camel case. So now if we save, and let's go back to our website and click the add to cart button, it will get that data attribute from the button and display it in the console. If we click the socks add to cart button, this will tell us which product we should add to the cart. So now that we have the product name, let's actually put this into our cart. So let's go into our code, and here, let's save the product name in a variable called const product name equals, and then here, we're going to add this to the cart. So we already created a cart variable here. So we're just going to type the variable cart, and we're going to dot push into the array. And let's push an object because we said we wanted a product and the quantity. So we'll add an object containing the product name, which is this variable product name, and a quantity of 1. And that's pretty much it. We first attached the product name to the button using a data attribute, and then when we click the button, we got the product name out. And then we add the product to the cart. So at the bottom, let's console.log the cart to see what it looks like. If we save and then go here and open the console, right click, inspect console, and let's add a basketball to our cart. So we'll click here, and then in our cart, we now have a basketball with a quantity of 1. So now let's add another product to our cart. We'll go to the t-shirt and click add to cart. And now we have 2 products in our cart, 1 basketball and 1 t-shirt. So now we're successfully adding products to a cart. Next, let's try adding 1 t-shirt again. If we click add to cart, and unfortunately, this doesn't look quite right. The t-shirt product is repeated twice, and each of them has a quantity of 1. What we actually want to do is we want 1 t-shirt product with a quantity of 2, because this is how we're going to display it on the cart page. So let's figure out how to achieve this, and we'll do this step by step. First, we'll check if the product is already in the cart. If it is in the cart, we'll just increase the quantity by 1. If it's not in the cart, we'll add it to the cart. So let's convert these steps into code. So the first step is to check if a product is already in the cart. So how do we do that? Let's go back to our code. And one way to check this is we can loop through our cart and look for a particular product name. So up here, let's create some new lines, and let's check if this product name is already in the cart array. So we'll type cart, and we'll loop through the cart using dot for each, brackets, and then inside we'll give it a function, brackets, arrow, and curly brackets, and we'll give this a parameter, and let's just call it an item. So an item will contain a product name and a quantity. So we want to see if this product name is already in the cart. So we're going to check if the product name over here is equal to this item's product name. So we'll type equals the item dot product name and curly brackets. So if the product names match, that means this product is already in the cart. So let's save this matching item in a variable so we can use it later. So we're going to create the variable outside the for each loop and outside of its scope. So we'll type let matching capital I item, and we'll make it undefined to start. And if we find a matching item, we're going to save it in this variable. So matching item equals item. So this is how we figure out if a product is already in the cart. Now the next step is if the product is in the cart, we'll just increase its quantity by 1. So we'll type if matching item and curly brackets. So we can just type matching item here, because if we did find a matching item, it will be an object, which is a truthy value. So in here, we're going to increase the matching item's quantity by 1 using matching item dot quantity, and we'll plus equals 1. And finally, if the product is not in the cart, we'll add it to the cart, which is basically what we do here. So at the end, we can just type else if we did not find a matching item, curly brackets, and we'll move this code. So we'll select it, right-click, cut, and then in here, right-click and paste. And remove the new lines and save. So now let's go into our project. We'll right-click, inspect the console, and let's click the Add to Cart button for the basketball. So we'll click this, and then in our cart, we have a basketball with a quantity of 1. Let's add a t-shirt, and now we have 1 t-shirt with a quantity of 1. And if we click Add to Cart on the t-shirt again, now we have a t-shirt with a quantity of 2. So that's how we solve the problem of combining the quantities together. Now there's one last problem that we have to solve here, which is it's not good to use the product name to identify the product in the cart, because in an e-commerce website, we might actually have 2 products that have the same name, but from different brands. So to fix this, we should give each product an ID. And this ID should be unique, so no 2 products will have the same ID. So let's use an ID to identify these products instead of using the name. We'll go back to our code, and if we open our files here and go to data.products.js, you'll notice that I've actually added an ID for each of these products, and this ID is unique. So I added it here to save us a bit of work, so we don't have to create the IDs ourselves. So now let's just use this ID in our code. So we'll go back to amazon.js, and then in here, instead of using the product name, we're going to use the product's ID to identify it in the cart. But first, we need to attach the ID to the button. So we'll scroll up, and instead of a data-product name attribute, we're going to use a data product-id attribute. And we're going to save the product's ID instead. And now down here, we're going to grab the ID from the button. To do that, we'll change this to product ID. So remember, this gets converted from kebab case to camel case. And we'll rename this variable product ID. And then here, we'll compare product ID is equal to the item's product ID. And lastly, when we add to the cart, we're just going to add the product ID to the cart. And save. So now if we go to our website and click Add to Cart and check our console and expand this, you can see that we're saving the product ID so that two products with the same name will be able to be added to the cart. Okay, so that's how we make the Add to Cart button interactive. And now we finished all three steps. First, we save the data for the website in our JavaScript, and then we use this data to generate the HTML. And finally, we made it interactive. And this is the main idea of JavaScript. This is generally how we use JavaScript on a real website. Now let's go back to Git. So we'll open our code editor and open the Git section and review the changes that we made. So we'll expand it, and then in the HTML file, we just added the cart.js file, and then in here, we just created the cart array. And in our amazon.js file, we basically added a data attribute to the button, and then down here, we made the button interactive by adding an event listener. So now let's save these changes into Git. We'll type a message to describe our changes. Make add to cart button interactive. And click commit. All right, so let's close this for now. And the last feature we're going to create in this lesson is we're going to make this cart quantity in the top right interactive. So we'll do this step by step. First, we need to calculate the quantity, or the total number of products in our cart. And then we're going to put that quantity on the page here. So how do we calculate the total quantity of the cart? So remember that the cart is an array of objects, and each object has a quantity. So to calculate the total quantity, we can loop through this array and add the quantities together. Let's go into our code, and we'll open amazon.js, and let's scroll to the bottom. So here, after we update our cart, we're going to calculate the total quantity. So let's create some new lines. And as we saw earlier, we can loop through the cart array. So we'll type cart dot for each brackets and a function, arrow and curly brackets, and we'll give this a parameter item. So this is going to loop through each object in the cart. Next, we need a variable to store the total quantity. So let's create a variable up here. We'll type let and name it cart quantity and make it equal to 0 to start. And then as we loop through this array, we're going to add the item's quantity to this variable up here. So here we can type cart quantity plus equals the items dot quantity. So this will add up all the quantities and save it in this variable. So at the bottom, let's console.log the cart quantity to make sure that this is working. So we'll save and go back to our page and open the console, right-click, inspect, and console. When we click Add to Cart on the basketball, the quantity will be 1. If we click Add to Cart on the t-shirt, the quantity will be 2. If we click again, the quantity will be 3. So looking at the cart, it basically added 1 basketball and 2 t-shirts to get a total of 3. So that's how we can calculate the total quantity of the cart. So now that we have the total quantity, we're going to put it on the page here. And we can do this using the DOM. So let's go back to our code. And to use the DOM, we first need an HTML element where we're going to put this quantity. So let's find the HTML element for this number here. We can go back to our page. We're going to right-click this number and then inspect. And then we can click this icon in the top left, hover over this number, and click it. So this will tell us that the code for the number is this code right here, a div with a class cart quantity. So now we're going to search for this class cart quantity in our code. So let's go back to our code and let's go to the amazon.html file because the header is still in this file. And we'll type Control F or Command F to search for code, and we'll search for cart-quantity. And it will tell us that it's this line right here. So next, to use the DOM, we need to get this element into our JavaScript. To do that, we're going to add a class to this element. So let's add the class js-cart-quantity and save. Now let's go back to our JavaScript file, and I'm just going to move it down here so we can see it side by side. And we'll scroll down. After we calculate the quantity, let's get this element into our JavaScript using the DOM. So at the bottom, we'll type document.querySelector, brackets, and a string. We'll start with a dot and the class js-cart-quantity. And now that we have this element, we can change the HTML inside using the property .inner capital HTML, and we'll make it equal to the cart quantity that we calculated above. So let's save and go back to our website, and let's click the Add to Cart button for the basketball. Now it will update the quantity to be 1. Let's click the Add to Cart for the t-shirt. It will update the quantity again, and it will be 2. If we click it again, it will increase to 3. So now the cart quantity up here is interactive. The last thing we need to do is we'll go back to our HTML, and instead of starting at 3, the cart quantity should start at 0. So let's save. And now the cart quantity starts at 0. If we click Add to Cart, it will increase to 1. So that's how we create this cart quantity feature in the final project. So now we're finished all the features that we're going to do in this lesson. Let's go back to our JavaScript, and I'm just going to move it back up here. And let's clean up this code by removing these console.logs. And save. And finally, let's check Git one more time to see the changes that we made. So we can expand this and go to the Git section. If we click amazon.html, it will tell us we added this class. And if we click amazon.js, it will show us the code that we added for calculating the cart quantity and putting it on the page. So finally, let's type a message to describe our changes. Make the cart quantity interactive and commit. So now we can close this. And that's the end of this lesson. In this lesson, we started the final Amazon project. We set up and learned how to use Git to track changes. We learned the main idea of JavaScript, which is save the data, generate the HTML, and make it interactive. We created a list of products on the homepage. We made the Add to Cart button interactive, and we made the cart quantity interactive. Thanks for watching this course so far. If you want to support this channel, you can check out the premium version of my courses just like this one, where you can get a certificate of completion and a better learning platform. If you're interested in extra videos from me, more in-depth videos, and behind-the-scenes content, you can check out these links here. You can also support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, and sharing this video with others. Thanks again, and let's continue with the course. Here are some exercises to help you practice what we learned in this lesson. In this lesson, we're going to learn a feature of JavaScript called modules, which is a better way to organize our code. So first, let's take a look at a problem that we have in our current code. We're going to go to our files here, and we're going to open amazon.html. And then we're going to scroll to the bottom of this file to our script tags. So right now, we're using 3 script tags to run all of our JavaScript. So this runs all the code in cart.js, and then it runs all the code in products.js. And finally, it runs all the code in amazon.js. So this is basically the same thing as combining all the files together into one big file and then running all of our code. However, there's a big problem with using script tags like this. And that problem is it can cause naming conflicts. So in our situation here, we created a variable named cart in cart.js. This means we can't use the variable named cart in any of our other files. So for example, if we went to amazon.js and then we scroll to the top here, and let's say that we try to create another variable named cart. So at the top, we type const cart equals square brackets and save. And now if we go back to our project, you'll notice that the website stops working. And if we right click, inspect, and open the console, it will tell us that we got an error, and it says that cart has already been declared. So this is happening because we created a variable called cart in cart.js. And then later in amazon.js, we created another variable named cart. Now we can't have 2 variables with the same name in JavaScript, and this causes an error, and it causes our website to break. So this is called a naming conflict, when we have 2 variables with the same name. So the big problem with script tags is if we go back to our code, you can see here that it's really hard to tell which variables have been created in other files. And it's really easy to accidentally create a naming conflict like this. So that's the problem with using script tags like this and running our code one file at a time. It's very easy to get naming conflicts. So now we're going to learn how to solve this problem using a feature of JavaScript called modules. So a module basically contains a variable inside a file. So now this variable is not going to cause conflicts with anything outside the file. For example, in our project, we created a variable called cart, and we want to contain this variable inside the cart.js file so that it doesn't conflict with the cart variable inside the amazon.js file. So we can do this using a module. So now let's learn how to create our first module. We're going to go back to amazon.html, and then here, to create a module, we're simply going to delete this line of code that uses a script tag to load cart.js. So we'll delete it and save, and you'll see that the website is working again. So how does this work? When we use a script tag, it will run all the code inside cart.js. So this code will create a cart variable, and this will cause a naming conflict. By removing the script tag, we're no longer running the code inside cart.js. So we're no longer creating a cart variable, and it will no longer cause a naming conflict. So to create a module, we simply do two steps. Number one, we create a file and write our code inside the file. And number two, don't load the file with a script tag. By doing this, any variables we create inside the file will be contained inside the file, and it won't cause naming conflicts. So that's basically how we create a module. Okay, so now we run into another problem in our code. If we open amazon.js, we created this cart variable as an example, but what we actually want to do is to keep the cart variable inside cart.js because we want to keep all the code that's related to the cart inside this file. So in amazon.js, we're going to delete this code. And if we save and then go back to our project and click Add to Cart, you'll notice that it no longer works. So let's look at the console again to see what error we get. We'll right-click, inspect, and open the console. And it's going to tell us that cart is not defined. So the problem that we have here is that in this file, we're using the variable cart. But now, because we're not loading cart.js using a script tag, the cart variable doesn't exist anymore. It's contained inside cart.js, and we can't access it from the outside. So now we're going to learn how to get a variable out of a file or a module. To do that, we're going to do 3 steps. The first step is to add a type equals module attribute. The second step is to export, and the third step is to import. Let's learn these steps one by one. So the first step is to add a type equals module attribute. We're going to open amazon.html, and we're going to scroll to the bottom, and here in the last script tag where we load amazon.js, we're going to add an HTML attribute here. So we're going to type equals module and save. So the type equals module attribute basically lets this file get variables out of other files. It basically enables this feature. Now the second step is to export. So we're going to go to cart.js, and now we're going to choose which variables can be accessed outside of this file. So for example, we want to access the variable cart outside of this file. To do that, in front of the variable, we're just going to type the word export and space and save. So now this variable can be used outside of cart.js. The last step is to import. So we're going to go to the place where we're going to use this variable, which is inside amazon.js. And now at the top, we're going to tell the computer which variable we want to get from another file. So we'll type import open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and between these brackets, we're going to give the name of the variable we want to get, which is the cart variable. And then we'll tell the computer which file we want to get this variable from. So we'll type from single quotes and semicolon. And now inside these quotes, we're going to locate the file using a file path. So let's open up our files here so it's easy to see what files we have. So right now we're in amazon.js and we want to locate cart.js. So the first step is we actually need to get out of the scripts folder. We're in the scripts folder and we need to get out of it and into the data folder. So to get out of the current folder that this file is in, we're going to type ... So ... basically represents the folder outside of this current folder, which is this folder right here, JavaScript Amazon projects. And then we're going to type a / to go outside of the scripts folder. So now that we're outside of this folder, we're going to go into the data folder. So here, we're going to type data and then a / to go into this folder. And we're going to locate the file cart.js, and save. So what this code does is that it's going to take the variable cart out of the file cart.js. And we use this file path here to locate that file. So as a reminder, ... means to go outside of the current folder, outside of scripts, into here. And then we go into the data folder. And then inside the data folder, we find cart.js. So those are the 3 steps to get a variable out of a module. First, we add a type equals module attribute to enable this feature. And then we export the variables that we want to get out. And finally, we import the variables when we need them. Now there's 2 more things that we need to know about modules. Number 1, we have to put all of our imports at the top of the file. And number 2, in order for modules to work, we need to use live server. So for example, if I open the folder that contains amazon.html, so I open JavaScript Amazon project, and then I select this HTML file and right-click, open with Google Chrome, the website won't work. And that's because modules don't work if we open the HTML file directly like this. So let's close this for now. And to get modules to work, we need to open our code editor and then right-click the HTML file and open with live server. So in this course, in order for modules to work, we need to use live server to open our HTML files. So now that we learned how to use a module, let's talk about the benefits of modules. The first big benefit is that it helps us avoid naming conflicts. The only time that this causes naming conflicts is if we import this variable and we have another variable named cart inside this file, like this. So this will again create a naming conflict. If I save this, the website will stop working. But at least now we have control over when naming conflicts happen. They will only happen if we import the same variable name. Now modules have another feature that allows us to avoid this problem as well. So after the variable name that we import, we can type as and then a different name, such as my cart, and save. So this will basically take the import and rename it to my cart, so that this will no longer conflict with this variable name. So as you can see, modules have a lot of features that help us avoid naming conflicts when we have lots of files in our project. So now I'm just going to delete this and put the code back because that was just an example, and save. So the second big benefit of modules is that we don't have to worry about the order of our files. Before, when we loaded everything with script tags, we had to make sure that we load cart.js first, because we need the cart variable to be created, and then we can use it in Amazon.js. So the order of our script tags really matter, and it becomes really hard to manage when we have lots of files in a big project. But now with modules, we can just import the variables that we need, and we don't have to worry about the order that we're loading our files. So as you can see, modules are a better way to organize our code, especially in bigger projects. So now let's use Git and save our changes. So we'll go to the Git section here, and it will tell us we changed 3 files. In Amazon.js, we removed the script tag and added type equals module. In cart.js, we exported the cart variable. And in Amazon.js, we imported the cart variable from cart.js. So now let's save these into Git. So here we'll type a message, use modules and import cart from cart.js and commit. Now that we learned modules, let's use them in more places in our project. So let's close this for now, and we're going to open amazon.html. And next, we're going to turn products.js into a module as well. So we'll start off by deleting the script tag, because the script tag will just load all the code onto the page. So we'll delete this and save. So notice that our website stops working. And now inside amazon.js, we need to access products from products.js. So again, we're going to do 3 steps. The first step is to add a type equals module attribute, which we already have, so we don't need to do this again. The second step is to export the variables that we want to get out. So in this case, we want to get the products variable out of the products.js file. So let's open our files and open products.js, and we'll scroll to the top. So to get the products variable out of this file, in front of the variable, we're going to type export and space and save. And the last step is to import the variable that we need. So inside amazon.js, we need the products variable. So at the top, we're going to type import curly brackets, and then inside here, we're going to type the variable name that we want to get, which is products. And we're going to get this variable from single quotes, semicolon, and then inside here, we're going to locate the products.js file. So we're going to type ... and / to go outside of the current folder, so outside of the scripts folder, and then we're going to go into the data folder. So we'll type data and a / to go into the folder, and we're going to locate the file products.js and save. So now that we're importing this variable from this file, the rest of our code will work, and our website will start working again. So that's how we turn products.js into a module as well. So let's go into Git and take a look at our changes. So in amazon.html, we deleted the script tag, and then in products.js, we exported the variables that we wanted to get out, and then in amazon.js, we imported the variables that we need from the file. So let's type a message and save these changes into Git. Import products from products.js and commit. Let's close this, and let's open amazon.html. Now, the last thing is, you might be wondering, should we also delete this script tag that loads amazon.js? And the answer is no, because we still need one JavaScript file to load our code. So this file will import from all the other files that we created. And this is how we organize our code in a real website. So this file is called the entry point. So now that we've seen some examples of modules, we're going to use modules to organize our code better. So let's go into amazon.js. And then we're going to scroll down to the code for the Add to Cart button. So inside this file, we're going to scroll down here, all the way down to this code here. So this is the code that we run when we click Add to Cart. And you'll notice that we're running a lot of code here when we click that button. We're running code that adds the product to the cart, and we're also running code that calculates the quantity and updates the page. So a best practice in programming is that when we have a lot of code here that does different things, it's better to split these up into smaller functions to make our code easier to read. So here, this part of the code takes the product ID and then adds it to the cart. So it makes sense to split this into its own function. So let's scroll up, and at the top here, let's create a function for this code. So we'll type function, and let's call it add to cart, brackets and curly brackets. And then we're just going to move all this code into the function. So we'll select this code, and then right-click, cut, and then inside this function, right-click and paste. And then down here, we're going to run this function inside here. So when we click Add to Cart, we're going to run Add to Cart function that we just created and save. So now let's give this a try. So we'll click Add to Cart. And unfortunately, it doesn't work anymore. So let's take a look at the console to see if there's any errors. We'll right-click, inspect, and then open the console. And it's telling us that product ID is not defined. So if we look at our code here and scroll up in the function, you'll notice that we're using product ID, but it's no longer anywhere in the function. And that's because product ID is outside the function. So we actually want to keep this code outside because it's using this button. So instead, we're going to take product ID and put it into a function using a parameter. So at the top of the function, we're going to add a parameter product ID. And then when we call this function, we're going to pass it the product ID. So we're going to take this value, put it into the function, and save it in here, and then the function can run as normal. So now if we save, and then go to our project, and click Add to Cart, you can see that it's working again. Next, let's go back and scroll down. And we're going to put the rest of our code into its own function as well to make it more organized. So at the top here, let's create some new lines and create a function. And this code updates the cart quantity on the page here. So let's name this function update cart quantity, brackets and curly brackets. And we'll move this code into the function. So let's select this code and then right-click, cut, and then in here, right-click and paste. And then down here, we'll call the function using update cart quantity and brackets and save. So as you can see, by splitting up our code into smaller functions, it makes our code a lot easier to read. When we click Add to Cart, it's really easy to understand what's going on. First, we're going to add a product to our cart, and then we're going to update the cart quantity. So now let's save, and then go back to our project and try it out. And you can see that everything is working again. So we're going to do two more things to better organize our code. So let's go back to our code. And the first thing is we're going to scroll up to the Add to Cart function. And I made a small mistake in the previous lesson. I actually want to rename this parameter from item to cart item instead to make it a little more clear. So we're just going to rename this to cart item. And here as well, rename it to cart item, and save. And we'll scroll down here, and we're going to do the same thing for this parameter. So we'll rename it to cart item, and then here, cart item, and save. And the last thing we'll do is let's scroll up to the add to cart function. So you'll notice that this code manages our cart. So it's actually a best practice to move this function into cart.js, because cart.js contains all the code that's related to the cart. A best practice is to group related code together into its own file. So here, let's take the function add to cart. We'll select it and then right-click, cut. And then inside cart.js, we're going to right-click and paste. And just move that function into this file, because this file contains all the code that's related to the cart. So now that this function is inside the file, we need to access it from amazon.js. And we can do that using modules, using the features export and import. So inside cart.js, in front of the function, we're going to export it so we can use it in other files. So let's save this file. And then inside amazon.js, we're going to scroll to the top. And you'll notice that we're already importing something from cart.js. So we actually don't need to write import again. Here, we can actually import multiple things from this file by typing comma and space, and then something else that we want to import. So in our case, we're going to import the function add to cart. So here, we'll type comma add to cart. So now it will import both the cart and the add to cart function from this file. So imports can import multiple things from a file. Imports have another syntax, import star as. This imports everything from a file and groups it together inside this object. And then we can access each import as a property or a method. So lastly, I'm just going to scroll down to my code here, and I'm just going to remove this extra new line and save. Now you might be wondering if we should move update cart quantity into cart.js as well. So this function actually handles updating the web page rather than managing the cart. So we're going to keep this function inside this file for now. So now let's go into Git and save our changes. So we'll go here, and inside cart.js, we moved the add to cart function, and then we exported it. And then inside amazon.js, we imported the add to cart function. And then down here, we took the big block of code that we had before, and we separated it into two functions, add to cart and update cart quantity. And this made our code a lot easier to read. So now let's type a message describing our changes. Move add to cart into cart.js and commit. Next, we're going to create the checkout page in our final project, and we're going to use modules to organize our code again. So let's open the final project, and we're going to click this cart icon in the top right. And this will take us to another page, which is the checkout page. So on this page, we can see the products that are in our cart. So if you're wondering how that cart icon works, it basically uses an HTML element called a link element, which looks like this. Link elements have a special attribute called href. When we click a link element, whatever is inside the href attribute, it will open it in the page. So if we put youtube.com inside the href and we click the link, it will open youtube.com in our browser. If we put a file like checkout.html inside href, it will look for a file called checkout.html and open that file. So in our project, if we look at our code, and open our files. Inside Amazon.html, we're basically just using a link element or an A element. And this has an href of checkout.html. So what this does is it's going to look for a file called checkout.html beside the current file, amazon.html. So here's amazon.html, and it's going to look for checkout.html beside it, and then open that in our browser, which is how that cart icon works. So in our browser, at the top, you can see that it opened checkout.html. So that's basically how a link element works and how we can navigate from one page to another. You can learn more about link elements in my HTML and CSS full course. But for now, we're going to learn how to build the checkout page using JavaScript. So first, let's take a look at the code for this page. So again, the code is inside checkout.html. So in our code editor, we're going to open checkout.html. And this is the code for the page that we saw earlier that contains our cart. So just like with the home page, instead of writing all this HTML manually, we're going to use JavaScript to generate this HTML. So first, we need to add JavaScript to this page. So let's scroll down to the very bottom here. And right before the end of the body, we're going to create a script element to load some JavaScript. And we'll give it an attribute source equals double quotes, and then a file we want to load. So let's create a new JavaScript file for this page. So inside our scripts folder, let's click amazon.js and then click this icon to create a new file. And let's name this file checkout.js and press enter. And now we're going to load this page inside checkout.html. So here in the source attribute, we're going to locate this file. So first, we need to go into the scripts folder. So we'll type scripts and then a slash to go into the folder, and then we'll load the file checkout.js. And next, we're going to add another attribute, type equals double quotes module. So remember from earlier in the lesson, this attribute enables module features for this file. So now this file can import from other JavaScript files. So now let's save and let's open checkout.js. And we'll start creating this page with JavaScript. So let's go back to our page first and take a look at the structure of this page. So you can see on this page, we actually have two sections. We have the cart section on the left, which shows the products in our cart. And we also have the payment section on the right, which calculates the cost of our order. So let's use JavaScript to create the cart section first. So remember, the main idea of JavaScript is first, we're going to save the data, and then we're going to generate the HTML. And finally, we'll make it interactive. Let's start by saving the data that we need for this section of the page. So for this section, we're basically displaying a list of products along with the quantity of each product that we want to buy. And if you remember, we already created a data structure to represent this, which is our cart. Inside our cart, we have the ID of the product as well as the quantity that we want to buy. So we can just reuse this data structure to create this section. So let's go into our code, and we're going to open cart.js. So inside here, we have an array called cart that's supposed to represent our data here. So right now, our cart is empty. So to make it easier for us to develop, we're just going to add some default values into this array. So inside here, let's create an object and put one product into our cart first. So looking at this page, the product that we want to put is the socks. So we'll go back into our code, and I'll rearrange my windows so we can see it side by side. And we're going to get the product ID for the socks here. So we're going to go into products.js, and then here's the socks. We're just going to take this ID, right-click, copy, and then inside the cart. And remember, we structured our data so that each cart item has a product ID as well as a quantity. So here, we're going to create the same structure that our current code uses. So we're going to give each object a product ID, colon, and single quotes. And we're just going to right-click and paste the ID that we copied earlier. And then we'll type a comma, and we'll give it a quantity, colon, and for the first item, we're going to give it a quantity of 2. So we'll just create a cart that kind of matches what we see on this page. Next, let's create a second cart item to represent the basketball. So we'll type comma, curly brackets. We'll give it a product ID, colon, and single quotes. And then we're going to get the ID for this basketball. So inside products.js, we're going to scroll down to the basketball here, and we're going to copy this ID, right-click, copy, and then inside cart.js, in here, right-click and paste. And we'll give this one a quantity, colon, 1, and save. So what we're doing here is we're just creating some default values that we can use to write the code to generate this page. So this is just for development. When we're actually using the website, the cart will start off as empty. So if we compare our data to our page, you might notice that there's a few things that are missing, such as the product's image, the name, and the price. So how come we're not saving these into our data? And that's because we're using a special technique. We're just saving the product's ID, and then we can use this ID to search for this product inside the products array here. So using the ID, we can find all the other details of the product, like the image, the name, and the price. So there's no need to save this data twice inside the products array and inside the cart array. All we have to do is save the ID of the product that we want and then search for it. So this technique is called deduplicating the data or normalizing the data. And this is a very common technique in software engineering. Okay, so the one other thing that we probably need to save in our data is the delivery times and the delivery options. But we're going to leave this for the next lesson because it requires some more features that we're going to learn. So for now, we finished saving the data that we need. The next step is to use this data to generate the HTML. So let's open checkout.js. So I'm just going to drag it to the bottom here so we can see it side by side. So the first step we need to do is to take the cart array and import it into checkout.js so we can use it. So in here, let's import curly brackets, the cart array. And we're going to import it from single quotes and semicolon. And we're going to use a file path between the quotes to locate cart.js. So let's open our files again. And to get from here to here, we need to go out of the scripts folder. So to do that, we can type ... and then / to go to the outer folder, and then we're going to go to the data folder. So we'll type data / to go into this folder, and we'll locate cart.js. So cart.js, and save. And next, we're going to loop through this cart and generate the HTML, just like we did for the home page. So let's close this for now. And here, we're going to create a loop over the cart. So we'll type cart.forEach, brackets, and a function. And then we'll give it a parameter. Let's call it cart item. And then for each cart item here, we're going to generate this HTML. So in here, let's create a template string for the HTML using backticks. And we'll create some new lines. And then here, we're going to copy and paste the HTML for one of these products. So first, let's find the HTML for one of these products. And to do that, we can right-click, inspect, and then click this top left icon. And then click the element we want to get the HTML for. So here's the HTML for one of these products. And we're going to search for this class cart item container in our code. So inside our code, let's open checkout.html. And we'll type Control F or Command F to search for code. And we'll search for the class cart-item-container, which is this code right here. So if we collapse it and collapse this, this is the code for these two products here. So we're going to take this HTML and we're going to move it into our JavaScript so we can generate it with JavaScript. So we'll right-click, copy, and then in here, right-click and paste. And if we need to fix the formatting, we can select all of these lines and then press Shift-Tab to remove some indents. And I'll add an indent here. Next, when we're generating this HTML, we want to replace this with the actual product's image and this with the actual product's name. So we're going to take this cart item and use it to get the data that we need. So let's open cart.js to see what each cart item looks like. So we have the product ID and the quantity. So first, we need to use this product ID to search for the product in order to get the other details, like the image, the name, and the price. So to do that, let's get the product ID out of the cart item first. So we'll create a variable const product ID equals the cart item dot product ID. And now we need to use this to search for the full product. So the full product, if we open our files, is inside products.js, which is this array right here. So I'm just going to move this up here so we can see it side by side. So to search inside this array, we actually need to import products into checkout.js. So let's use some module features again. At the top, we'll import curly brackets, the products array, and we'll import it from single quotes and semicolon. And then here, we'll locate the products.js file. So we'll type .. to go out of the scripts folder. And then we'll go into the data folder, data, and then a / to go into this folder. And we'll import from products.js. So products.js and save. So now we have access to this products array here. And we'll search the array for the full product details. So down here, let's create a variable to save the result. So we'll type let, and we'll name it matching product. And then down here, we'll loop through the products array. So we'll type products.for each brackets and a function. And then we'll give it a parameter, product. And now for each product here, we're going to check if the ID property is equal to our product ID here. So down here, we'll check if the product.id property is equal to our product ID up here. And then if they're equal, that means we found the matching product, and we're going to save it in this variable. So matching product equals this product that we're looping through. So now that we have the matching product, we have access to the image, the name, as well as the price that we can use to generate this HTML. So this is a good example of deduplicating or normalizing our data. So now at the bottom, let's console.log our matching product to see if it works. So matching product and save. Now if we go into our project and we right-click, inspect, and check our console, you can see that we were able to get the full product details for each of these products using the product ID. So now that we have the full product details, we can use this to generate all this HTML. So down here, instead of generating the same image every time, we're going to use the image in the matching product. So let's get rid of this code. And here, we're going to remove this. And we're going to substitute using $ curly brackets, the matching product dot image. And we'll scroll down. And instead of the same product name every time, we're going to replace this. And we're going to substitute the matching product dot name. So each time we're going to generate HTML with a different image and a different name. And down here, the same thing. Remove the price, and we'll replace it with matching product dot, and then we'll just check here what the property is. It's called price cents. And remember, this is in cents, and to display it as dollars, we have to convert it by dividing by 100 and save. And lastly, we're going to replace the quantity here. So if we scroll down, we can see that this is the quantity. So instead of 2 every time, we'll substitute. And for the quantity, remember it's not part of a product, it's part of our cart. So each cart item has a property called quantity. So down here, we're going to substitute the cart item dot quantity and save. So now we're generating all this HTML by looping through our cart. So the next step is we're going to combine all this HTML together and then put it on the page. So I'm just going to move this up here so we can see more of the code. So to combine all this HTML together, let's create a variable up here to store the result. So we'll type let, and let's call it the cart summary HTML equals an empty string. And now each time we loop through the cart, we're going to add this HTML up here so that we combine it. So here we'll type cart summary HTML plus equals this HTML that we generated. And at the bottom, I'll just add a semicolon. And then let's console.log the cart summary HTML. Console.log cart summary HTML to make sure that it worked. So we'll save, and then in here, we'll check the console, right-click, inspect the console, and now you can see that we generated the HTML, and each cart item is different depending on the product that is being displayed. So that's how we generate all the HTML for this section, and the last step is to take this and put it on the page using the DOM. So first, we need an element that we can put the HTML inside of. To find this element, let's right-click, inspect, and click the top left, and click one of these products. And let's find this order summary element, because this contains both of our products here. So we're going to replace all the HTML inside here with what we generated. So let's search for the class order summary in our code. So we'll go back to our code, and let's open checkout.html. And we'll type Control F or Command F to search for code, and we'll search for the class order-summary, and then it's right here. And we're going to add a class so we can select it using the DOM. So js-order-summary and save. So now let's use the DOM and put this element in our JavaScript. So inside here, at the bottom, we'll use document.querySelector brackets, and the class we just created .js-order-summary, and we'll use the property .inner capital HTML, and we'll change the HTML to cart summary HTML, and we can remove this line. And now if we save, we're basically generating all this HTML with JavaScript and then putting it on the page. So now we can go back to checkout.html, and we can actually remove the code inside this order summary. So we can delete this code and save, and everything will still work because this is now being generated by JavaScript. So that's how we create the cart section of this page with JavaScript. Let's go into Git and save our changes. So we'll open the Git section, and then it will tell us that we changed 3 files. In checkout.html, we removed all the HTML that was written manually. And then at the bottom, we created a script tag to load our JavaScript. And then we also changed cart.js and added some default values to work with. And then we created checkout.js, which loops through the cart, creates the HTML, and puts it on the page. So let's create a message to describe our changes. Generate HTML for the order summary, and commit. Next, let's open our project again. And before we continue, we actually have 2 issues that we need to fix. The first issue is that the price is displaying as 1 decimal here instead of 2. And the second issue is that these delivery options are actually shared between the 2 products. For example, if I click this delivery option here, it will actually unselect for the second product. So they're sort of shared between the 2 products. But what we actually want is for each product to be able to select its own delivery options. So we're going to fix these 2 issues next. First, let's focus on the price, and we want to display it in 2 decimals. So we actually learned how to fix this on the home page using the method toFixed. So we're going to use the same code here. Let's go into our code, and we'll open our files, and let's open checkout.js again. So here, we're going to scroll down to where we display the price, which is here, price cents. And to show this in 2 decimal places, we're going to surround this with brackets to make sure we calculate it first, and then use the method .toFixed, brackets, and then 2 to show 2 decimal places. If we save and then open our project, now the price is displaying correctly. Before we move on, we're going to learn how to better organize this code. So if we go back, so notice that we're using this code inside the checkout page as well as inside amazon.js, which is the home page. So we can actually share this code between the 2 files so we don't have to repeat it. And to do that, we can use modules. So let's open checkout.js again. And what we'll do is we're going to create a function that does the same thing as this code. And then we can share this function between the 2 files. So let's create a file that's going to contain this shared function. So we're going to go to our scripts folder here, and inside, we're going to create a new folder this time. And let's call this folder utils, and press enter. So we're naming it utils because this code is sort of like a useful utility that we want to share. Now inside this folder, we're going to have different types of utils. So let's create a new file, and let's name it money.js. So this file is going to contain utilities that are related to money, which is this code right here. So let's press enter, and I'm just going to move this to the bottom so we can see it side by side. So now inside this utils file, we're going to create a function that does the same thing as here, and then we can share it between the 2 files. So here, we'll create a function and let's name it format currency, because that's what this code is doing. And then brackets and curly brackets. So this function is basically going to do the same thing as here. So we're going to add a parameter here, price cents, because we want to use this function for any amount of price cents. And then in here, we're going to do the same thing, which is price cents divided by 100. And then we're going to surround this with brackets to make sure we calculate this first. And then display it in 2 decimal places using .to fixed, brackets, and 2. And finally, let's return this result. Return. And save. So what we just did is we created a function that does the same thing as this code here. And now we're going to share this function between checkout.js and amazon.js. So first, in order to share it, we need to export this function. So at the front, we're going to type export and save. And now inside each of these files, we're going to import this function and use it. So let's scroll to the top. And here, we're going to import curly brackets. We're going to import the function format currency, and we're going to import it from single quotes and semicolon. And then inside here, we're going to locate the file money.js. So here, we're in the checkout.js file, which is right here. And to go here, we're first going to go into the utils folder. So we're going to type utils and then a slash to go into this folder. And we're going to locate the file money.js. So money.js. Now, for modules, we have to do one extra thing. At the front of this file path, we need to type /. So remember that .. represents the folder outside the current folder. So for checkout.js, if we go outside of this folder, we're going to go outside the scripts folder. Now, a single dot, on the other hand, means the current folder. So this dot means we're going to go into the current folder, which is the scripts folder, and then we're going to go into the utils folder. And then we're going to go and locate money.js. So for modules, if we want to start in the current folder, our file paths have to start with /. So that's one extra thing that we have to do. So now that we've imported the format currency function, let's use it in the rest of our code. So we're going to scroll down to here, and instead of writing this all over again, we're just going to use the function format currency, and then brackets, and we're going to remove the rest of the code here, and close bracket, and save. So we're basically running the same code, except we're using this shared function that's located in another file. So let's open our project, and we can see that the price is still displaying correctly. So now let's go back into our code, and we're going to share this function inside amazon.js as well. So let's open amazon.js, and then we'll scroll to where we show the price, which is here, and we're going to use this function again. So first we have to import it, so we'll scroll up to the top, and import curly brackets. We'll import the function format currency, and we'll import it from single quotes semicolon, and then here we'll locate the file money.js. So remember, for modules, if we want to start in the current folder, we have to type /. And then we're going to go to the utils folder. So utils, and then a slash to go inside the folder, and locate the file money.js. And now we're going to use this function. So let's scroll down, and we're going to replace this code and use format currency and brackets. So we can remove the rest of the code here and save. And now let's look at our project. And we'll click up here to go back to the home page. And you can see that the prices are displaying as 2 decimal places. And that's it. If we look at our code again, we're essentially taking this function and sharing it across 2 files using modules. So using modules, we can reuse a lot of our code and reduce repetition. Next, let's work on the second issue that we saw earlier. So we'll go back to our project and click the top right to go back to the checkout page. And then here, the delivery options are shared between the 2 products. But we want each product to choose its own delivery options. So to fix that, let's go back into our code. And I'm just going to resize it here so we can see it side by side. And we'll open checkout.js again. And we can close this for now. So this is an HTML element called a radial selector. And here's the code for a radial selector. So the way that radial selectors work is that if a set of radial selectors have the same name, then we can only select one of them. So for example, if these 3 radial selectors have the same name attribute, then we can only select one of them. Now, if the 3 at the top have one name and the 3 at the bottom have a different name, then we can select one from the first 3 as well as one from the second 3. Now, what's the problem with the radial selectors here? Well, let's take a look at the code for these selectors. To do that, we're going to right-click one of them, and then inspect, and then click the top left, and click one of these selectors to get the HTML code. So here we have the code for the radial selector, and you can see that the name of the selector is delivery option 1. And now if we click the top left again, and find one of these bottom selectors, you'll notice that these also have the name delivery option 1. So all 6 of these have the same name attribute. That's why we can only select one of these 6 at a time. So what we actually want to do is we want the first 3 selectors to have one name and the second 3 selectors to have a different name. So let's figure out how to give these a different name. So inside the console, we can see the code for this selector. And we have a name attribute delivery-option-1. So let's actually find this name in our code. So we'll go to our code editor and Control F or Command F to search for code. And we'll search for delivery-option-1. And if we scroll down, you'll notice that every time we're generating these radial selectors, we're always using the same name, delivery option 1. So every product is going to have the same name for the radial selectors, and all of these are going to be shared. So what we actually want to do is, instead of using the name delivery option 1 every time, each product is going to use a different name for these 3 selectors. So one way we can do that is, instead of the number 1 every time, we can replace it with the product's ID, because the ID is always unique for each product. So let's substitute using $ and curly brackets the product.id. And then down here as well, instead of using the name 1 every time, we're going to substitute product.id. And actually, we use the name matching product. So we'll scroll down and just update this to matching product. And then down here, matching product. And as well down here, instead of 1 every time, substitute the matching product.id and save. So now these 3 radial selectors will have a different name attribute than these 3 radial selectors. That means we can select 1 out of these 3, and we can select 1 out of these 3. So that's how we fix that error. Instead of using the same name, delivery option 1 every time, we're going to generate a name using the product's ID. So let's go into Git and save our changes. So in Amazon.js, we imported this shared function, and we used it to format the price in 2 decimal places. And then in checkout.js, we also used the shared function here, and we fixed the radio selectors. And then in this file, money.js, we created this shared function. So let's create a message to describe our changes, fix price formatting, and radio selectors, and commit. The last step in our process is to make it interactive. So I'm just going to close these for now, and going to move it to the right again so we can see our project. And for the order summary, there's a few things we can make interactive. For now, we're going to start with this delete link. When we click this link, it should remove this product from the cart. So we're going to learn how to build this. So let's go back to our code. And first, let's add event listeners to all of these delete links. To do that, we're going to find the code for these delete links. So we'll right-click, inspect, and then in here, this is the code. So we're going to search for this class in our code editor, delete-quantity-link. So in here, let's open checkout.js, and we're going to Control F or Command F and search for delete-quantity-link, which is right here. Next, we're going to add a class to these elements so we can add event listeners. So at the end here, let's add a class js-delete-link and save. And then at the bottom, we're going to scroll down. And then down here, we're going to add the event listeners. So first, we're going to select all the delete links on the page using document.query selector all brackets and then a string. And we're going to select a class using dot and the class js-delete-link. And then we're going to loop through all these links. So dot for each brackets and a function. And in here, it will give us the link every time. And then for each of these links, we're going to add an event listener. So link.add event listener brackets. And here, we're going to give a string and the event we want to listen for, which is a click, and then a function that we want to run when we click these links. So for now, let's just console.log string delete to make sure that it's working. So we'll save this, and then in here, we click these delete links, and then open the console, right-click, inspect console. We can see that it's working now. So now let's go back to our code. So when we click delete, we're going to do 2 steps. The first step is we're going to remove the product from the cart. And the second step is we're also going to update our HTML and remove the product from the page. So let's start with the first step. So when we click delete, how do we know which product we need to remove from the cart? So we learned how to do this for the Add it to Cart button. We can attach the product's ID to the link element. So let's scroll up again to where the delete link is, which is right here. And we're going to attach the product's ID to this element using a data attribute. So at the end here, we're going to add data-product-ID equals double quotes. And then here, we'll substitute the matching product.id and save. And now that we attached the product ID to this element, we can get it in our JavaScript below. So let's scroll down. And then here, we're going to delete this line. And using the link element, we can get that product ID using link.dataset to access the data attributes. And we're going to access .product ID. And let's save this in a variable so we can use it later. So const product ID equals this value. And let's console.log this to see if it works. And save. So now if we go to the project and click the delete link for the first product, and then look at the console, inspect and console, it will show us the product's ID. If we click the second product's delete link, it will show us the second product's ID. So now we have the ID that we need to remove from the cart. So now, how do we actually do that? So before we begin figuring that out, instead of writing all the code down here, let's actually create a function inside cart.js to do this task. The reason we're going to do this is because cart.js is supposed to contain all the code that's related to the cart. So this will help us organize our code better. So let's open our files again, and we're going to open cart.js. And we're going to scroll to the bottom, and we're going to create a function for removing a product from the cart. So let's type function, and let's name it remove from cart, brackets and curly brackets. So this function will take a product ID, which we have, and remove it from the cart. So here, let's create a parameter for the ID, product ID, and now in here, we're going to figure out how to remove it. So here's one way we can do this. First, we can create a new array, and then we can loop through our cart, and then add each product to the new array, except for this product ID. So now let's convert these steps into code. So inside this function here, let's create a new array using const, we'll call it new cart equals an empty array. The next step is we're going to loop through our cart. So we'll type cart.for each brackets and a function, and we'll give it a parameter cart item. And the last step is that we're going to add each cart item to the new array, except if it has this product ID. So we can do that by checking if the cart item dot product ID is not equal to the product ID that we're looking for, product ID. So if it's not equal to the product we're trying to remove, we're going to add it to the new cart. So new cart dot push cart item. So the result of this loop is it's going to contain all the cart items that don't match this product ID. And that's the same thing as removing this from the cart. So now the last step is we're going to take our new cart and replace the cart up here. So we'll scroll down, and then here we'll make cart equal to our new cart. Because we're reassigning this variable, we have to scroll up and change it from const to let and save. So now that we created this function, let's use it in our checkout page. First, we're going to use the modules feature and export this function and save. And then inside checkout.js, we're going to import this function. So I'm just going to move this down to the bottom so we can see it side by side. So here. So in checkout.js, we're going to scroll up, and we're already importing from cart.js. So we're just going to import one additional thing by typing comma, and we're going to import this function, remove from cart, and save. And then we're going to use this function at the bottom. So we'll scroll down, and then here, we're going to remove from cart brackets, and we're going to give it the product ID we want to remove. So product ID. And lastly, let's just console.log the cart to make sure that this works. So console.log the cart and save. So now let's go into our project and we're going to click this delete link for the first product. So delete, and let's open the console. Right click, inspect the console, and now it's going to show us that we have one product remaining in the cart. And this product has a quantity of 1, which is the second product here. So by clicking that delete link, we successfully removed this product from the cart. So now if we refresh and tried clicking the second delete link and look at the console and then expand the cart, it will tell us that the remaining product has a quantity of 2, which is this product. So we successfully removed the second product from the cart when we clicked delete. So now let's go into Git and look at our changes. So we'll go into this section. Well, I can close this for now. And we'll open Git. And it will tell us that in cart.js, we changed it to let, and we created this new remove from cart function. And then in checkout.js, we import that function. And then at the bottom, when we click the delete link, we're going to remove this product from the cart. Now, finally, we can remove this console.log, save, and we're going to put these changes into Git. So we'll type a message to describe our changes. Delete products from cart when clicking delete, and commit. The second thing we have to do when we click delete is to update our HTML. So if we go back to our project, when we click delete, we want to remove this product from the page. So one way we can do this is first, we're going to use the DOM to get the element we want to remove. And then we can use a method called .remove. So every element that we get from the DOM has a method called .remove, which removes it from the page. So first of all, how do we know which element to get from the page? So let's actually look at the HTML for one of these products. We're going to right-click, inspect, and then click the top left, and then click one of these products here. And this will give us the HTML. So these two products are represented by these two divs here, with the class cart-item-container. So one way to identify which product this is for is to add a special class to this element. And this class will contain the product ID. And then if we go back to our code and we open checkout.js and scroll to the bottom, when we click delete, we have the product ID here. So we can use this to select that special class that we're going to add. So first, let's add that special class to each of these elements. So we're going to scroll up to the HTML, and we're going to go to the top here to the div cart-item-container. And then here, we'll add a special class js-cart-item-container dash, and then we'll substitute the product's ID. So we'll type the matching product.id. And let's put this class on a separate line, so the line is not too long. Now let's save. And now we're going to scroll to the bottom and use our code to get this class. So we'll scroll to the bottom. And here, we're going to use the DOM as well as this product ID to get that special class that we just added above. So here, we can type document.querySelector, brackets, and then inside, we'll type a string, and we'll select the class using a .js-cart-item-container dash, and then we're going to substitute the product ID. So because we want to insert something in here, we're going to switch this to a template string using backticks. And now we can substitute this product ID into this string. product ID. So by creating the string like this, we're able to select the specific container that we need. So now let's save this in a variable so we can use it later. So const container equals this result. So for now, let's actually console.log this to see if it works. Console.log container and save. And then we'll go back to our project. So just move this here. And then in our project, if we click delete on the first product and then check the console, right click, inspect, and the console, you can see that we're getting the correct element that we should delete. If we go down here and click this delete link and check the console, you can see that this is also getting us the correct element that we want to delete. So now that we have the element we want to delete, the next step is to use the .remove method. So again, every element we get with the DOM has a method called .remove, which will remove it from the page. So if we go back into our code, down here, all we have to do is type out the element container .remove and brackets, and this will remove it from the page. If we save and try it out, so we'll go in here, we'll click delete on the first product, and it will remove it from the page. If we click delete on the second product, it will also remove it from the page. So that's it. Now let's refresh to bring the products back, and that's how we make the delete link interactive and remove the products from the cart as well as from the page. So now let's save our changes into Git. We'll go to the Git section, and it will tell us that in checkout.js, at the top, we added that special class, which contains the product ID. And if we scroll down to the bottom, we created the string, which will get us the specific element that we want to remove. And then we use the .remove method. So now let's create a message to describe our changes. Delete products from HTML when clicking delete and commit. The last thing we're going to do in this lesson is we're going to add local storage to our cart. So if we go back to our project, if we delete some products in our cart and then refresh, notice that our cart goes back to what it was before. And that's because right now, if we look at our code and we open cart.js, our cart is just a variable, and variables are reset when we refresh the page or when we go to a different page. So again, if we go back to our project and we go to a different page by clicking the top left, so on this home page, we can add as many products as we want to our cart. And if we go back to the checkout page, our cart will just get reset to whatever it is here. So that's the problem with just using a variable to save our cart. It gets reset when we refresh the page or we go to a different page. To solve this problem, we're going to use local storage to save our cart. So first, let's create a function for saving the cart to local storage, because we might want to reuse this code. So down here, let's create a function. We'll call it save to storage, brackets and curly brackets. And we're just going to save the cart to local storage using local storage dot set item, brackets. And set item takes two strings. The first string is the name of whatever we want to save. So we're going to save our cart. So we're just going to call this the cart. And then the second string is the data that we want to save. So remember that local storage can only save strings. So to save our cart, we need to convert it into a string first. And we can do that using json.stringify, brackets, and then inside we're going to give it the cart. So this will convert the cart into a string, and now we can save it in local storage. So now let's use this function. Whenever we update the cart, we need to save it to local storage so it doesn't get reset when we refresh the page. So here, when we add it to the cart, at the bottom, after we update the cart, we're going to use that function we created above. Save to storage and brackets. And also in the function remove from cart. So this function is also updating the cart. So after we update the cart, we're also going to save to storage and brackets and save. So now whenever we update the cart, we're going to save it in local storage. The last thing we need to do is at the top, at the beginning of our code, we need to get the cart from local storage instead of using this default value. So let's add some new lines here to separate the code for a bit. And here, we're going to get the cart from local storage. And we can do that using local storage.getItem and brackets. So getItem takes one string, and that is the name of what we saved earlier, which is the cart. So we're going to give it the string cart. So this will give us the cart that we saved. However, remember that local storage can only save strings. So it will give us the string version of our cart, and we need to convert it back into an array. To convert it back to an array, we can use the code json.parse and brackets and close bracket. The last thing we need to do is when we first use the website, we might not have a cart in local storage. So if we don't have a cart saved, local storage will give us null. So in this situation, if this value is null, we want to give the cart a default value, which is this value below. So to give the cart a default value if it's empty, we can use an if statement by typing if brackets and curly brackets. And in here, we can check if not cart. So if we don't have a cart in local storage, this will give us null. In this case, not null will become truthy, and we're going to run the code in this if statement. So if the cart is empty, we're going to make the cart equal this default value below. So let's just select this code, and we'll right-click, cut, and then in here, right-click and paste. And remove the extra line, and save. So now if the cart is empty, we'll just give it a default value. If we go back to our project and try out our code, so let's delete the first product and refresh the page, notice that the cart gets saved and the first product remains deleted. If we go to the home page and we add some new products and then go to our cart, notice that our cart is saved between pages. So by using local storage, we can save our cart even when we refresh the page or go between different pages. So that's all we're going to build in this lesson. So to clean up, let's delete all these products in the cart and then go to the home page, and we'll add back 2 socks and 1 basketball, which is the default value of the cart. Let's go back to the checkout page. And now we're done with this part of the page. So finally, let's save our changes into Git. We'll go to the Git section, and it will tell us that inside cart.js, we're now loading the cart from local storage when we open the page. If the cart doesn't exist, we're going to give it a default value, and we created a function to save the cart into local storage. So now let's add a message to describe our changes. Save cart in local storage and commit. And that's the end of this lesson. In this lesson, we learned about modules, which is a better way to organize our code. We created the checkout page in our final project. We learned about HTML link elements and radial selectors. We made the delete link interactive, and we saved the cart in local storage. Here are some exercises to help you practice what we learned in this lesson. In this lesson, we're going to learn about external libraries, and we're going to finish the checkout page in our final project. An external library is basically just code that is outside of our project. So far, we've only been using code that is inside our project, like these files. Well, a lot of developers write JavaScript code and then put their code on the internet. And we can actually load their code from the internet into our project and use it. We call this code an external library because it's code that is outside of our project. Let's do an example and load our first external library. We're going to go to the video description and we're going to click this link. For the Hello external library. And it will open up a page that contains JavaScript code. So I actually wrote this code myself, and you'll notice that this is just normal JavaScript code. We create a function called hello, and it just console.logs hello. So this is called an external library. It's code that is outside of our project. So the cool thing is, we can actually load this code from the internet into our project. So let's give that a try. We're going to go to our project, and we're going to open checkout.html. And we're going to scroll to the bottom, and above the script tag, we're going to add another script tag to load some code. So script, and we'll give it a source attribute. And then in here, instead of using a file path like we've done before, we're going to give this a URL of a website that contains JavaScript code. So if we go back to our browser, and here, the URL of this page is up here. So we're just going to copy this, right-click copy, and then paste it into our code. Right-click and paste. So now, the computer will get all the JavaScript code from this URL or from this page. So it's going to get all the code from this page and load it into our project like normal code. So let's save, and let's give this a try. So this code creates a function called hello. So let's try running this hello function in our project. We'll go to checkout.js, and then scroll to the top, and then here, let's just run the function hello. So hello and brackets, and save. Now if we go back to our project, go to the checkout page, and check the console, right-click, inspect, and the console, you'll see that it displayed the message hello. So that's how an external library works. It's just code that is outside of our project. And we can load this code using a script tag like this. We just give it the URL of where this code is located. So there's two things you might be wondering about. How can we put this script tag at the top? So generally, we load external libraries first, and then we can use the library in our own code below. And the second thing is, how do you put code on the internet like this? To learn this, you can check out my video on how to put a website on the internet. It'll show you how to put any file like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files onto a website like this. Next, let's talk about why we use external libraries. External libraries let us share code. Instead of writing all the code ourselves, we can use code that other people wrote, and this helps us save time and avoid duplicating work. Right now, we're loading a very simple library, so let's load a more complex library to show how we can save a lot of time and work. Let's go back to our project and go to the checkout page. Here, we have a section for choosing a delivery option for this product. And you'll notice that each option has a date. So this is the date that the product should be delivered by. So the way this works is that the cheapest option here takes 7 days to deliver. The $4.99 option takes 3 days to deliver, and the $9.99 option takes 1 day to deliver. So to get these dates here, we need to do 3 things. First, we need to somehow get today's date in our JavaScript. Number 2, we need to do calculations with the date, such as add 7 days or add 3 days. And number 3, we need to display the date in an easy-to-read format like this. Now, we could try to figure out how to do this ourselves by writing our own code, but this is going to be a lot of work. Instead, we can use an external library to help us work with dates. So in this project, we're going to use an external library called day.js. This is a popular library that helps us work with dates. So first, let's load day.js into our project. We're going to go to the video description and we'll click this link. For the day.js external library. And when the page opens, you'll see a bunch of random code here. Now you might think that this is some special code, but this is actually just regular JavaScript code that has been compressed. So basically all the extra spaces have been removed and the variable names